We spend the first 12 months of our children's lives teaching them to walk and talk, and the next 12 years telling them to sit down and shut up. Phyllis Diller, American stand up comedian, actress, author, musician, and visual artist. All right, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Liberty Dad Podcast, discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. And man, I tell you what, I was having some technical problems this morning, but we overcame them and here we are. Hopefully, unlike yesterday, I don't have any further technical issues while I'm streaming, which I did. That was pretty wild. The stream just cut out yesterday, which was funny because I kind of titled this yesterday's episode, like, this is the one that might get me canceled. And then, I had this weird technology issue. And then I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Did I just get canceled already? Like in the middle of the show? Like, that was pretty fast. Wasn't expecting that one. But as it turns out, it was just a technical error. And I didn't get canceled. So I had to get up this morning and produce another episode. So here we are. We're going to talk about this bill out in California that Governor Newsom just signed, AB 1955. It is kind of making the rounds. You'll see. So let's see what the news is telling us about this particular this particular bill, and then we're going to dive in and talk about it. Because I have some questions about this particular bill, and we're going to bring them forward. So here we are. Let's see.
Well, in our reporting on this bill, we've told you it's been a major source of contention between those in support of it and those opposed to it. But what happened here at the state capitol took the drama on this bill to a whole new level.
Dr. Jackson, please.
Democratic Assemblymember Dr. Corey Jackson having to be physically restrained by his Democratic colleagues in the chamber Thursday. All of it taking place while lawmakers debated AB 1955. The legislation would prohibit school districts from enforcing and implementing LGBTQ plus notification policies. It would prevent teachers from outing transgender and LGBTQ plus children to their parents unless the child gives permission.
You are out of order now.
The drama on the floor, all beginning when GOP Assemblymember Bill Asaley, who is opposed to AB 1955, spoke about another bill he authored last year that would have required teachers to inform parents upon learning the child identifies as transgender. When Asaley expressed frustration with Democrats for killing that bill, this exchange between him and Democratic Assemblymember Jim Wood took place.
You are out of order.
I'm not out of order.
You are out of order.
All right. Well, let me get to 1955. The proponents have said, by the way, I am tired of being interrupted by you. You do not interrupt them. Hold on a second. You do.
Asaley's mic was then cut off.
So I want to pause here. If anybody has ever attended, like, say, the National Libertarian Party convention where things can get a little bit rowdy, this is kind of interesting. This is a welcome to me because it makes me feel like, oh, you know what? I guess we're not the only ornery ones during our business meetings. Apparently, the Democrats and the Republicans are as well. As shown here, the guy's getting angry. He's bringing up other bills. They're like, hey, you can't talk about that bill. We're here to talk about this bill. And he's like, well, you never interrupt these other guys, blah, blah. So, I was kind of amused watching this, to be honest with you.
Wood, who was presiding over the assembly session, explained why.
You were not debating the bill. You were debating a previous bill. If you persist, we may just ask you to leave.
Asaley was eventually allowed to speak again, and immediately he began with these remarks.
I wasn't prepared to address the Chinese Communist Party house today.
I'm sorry. That's funny. Like, this is a member of the California State Assembly, and he literally is getting so angry that he's like, he calls them the Chinese Communist Assembly. That's funny. Now, they probably didn't think it was funny, but hey, we should have a laugh at ourselves anyway.
I will address them now. I will do.
And once again, Asaley's mic was cut off. Just a few minutes after that, Asaley and Assemblymember Jackson, himself a member of the LGBTQ plus caucus, had some kind of exchange of words that led to this moment in which Dr. Jackson started to move toward Asaley and could be heard saying to him, quote, "You better watch yourself." While it's not clear exactly what Asaley said to Jackson to make him so upset, Jackson later wrote this on social media, quote, "Disrespecting and challenging the dignity and humanity of others will not be tolerated." Democrats eventually left the chamber for more than half an hour. When they returned, Asaley was once again able to speak on the bill and normal debate on it resumed. Asaley sharing this.
We do not believe that the government, the schools, have any authority to withhold information from parents at all, period.
But in the end,
All those vote who desire to vote.
the bill passed 60 to 15. Assembly Democrats gathered around AB 1955 author Chris Ward as he shared some final words about why he believes the bill will make a difference.
I know what it's like to face coming out. I know what it's like to have others target you, question you, and deny you. And we told trans youth that felt under attack that we had their back, and we meant it. And we are here today to send this bill to the governor.
And when asked if there may be any disciplinary action for those involved in what happened here, Assembly Speaker Robert Rivas did not give a definite yes or no, but did express gratitude the Assembly was able to carry on with its business. Reporting at the state capitol, covering local news that matters, Eitan Wallace, Fox 40 News.
All right. So nice, fun little video for the morning to get you kind of revved up. Like, hey, look, we got some assembly members about to get in a fight. Now, I get it. I don't condone violence. In fact, I oppose violence. Like I tell people, I dislike violence, but I'm not afraid of it. But if there's going to be a little rowdiness with our politicians, I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of cheering it on because, I'm like, finally, I have, some popcorn that's going to taste really delicious here. But anyway, that's the side point. Well, let's talk about this bill. Now, what's interesting is at the very tail end, the bill's author, kind of got all weepy eyed and he's like, all right, this is, and they're describing it in the video as this is going to help youth. I'm like, okay, let's find out what the bill does and let's find out the basis for this. Now, if you watch this show that I have clear criteria when it comes to bills. One of the biggest is you need to define the exact problem that you need to solve. That is the first and foremost thing. And if it doesn't define a very specific problem that needs to be solved, I start questioning it. And it just sounds like it might be a bill that makes people feel good. And I don't do feel good legislation because legislation is coming with the force of government. And when we have the force of government, we damn well better have a problem that we're actually trying to solve that we can identify with some level of data. So let's take a look. Let's see, where do we want to start first? You know what? Let's pull up this news article. I'm going to go through it because honestly, that clip doesn't really, it talks more about the squabbling and the almost fight that they had at the assembly rather than the bill itself. It kind of covers it briefly. So let me pull up this article here real quick and we'll go through it and we'll just kind of read what this bill does and some details about it. And then we're going to take a look at the bill itself really quickly. And then I've got some questions. So let's see what we've got here. All right. Booyah. Right there. Right on cue almost. All right. So it says Newsom signs ban on forced outing at California schools into law. Okay. So what they're trying to do right up front is they're saying like, look, we can't out children. That's the issue here. Okay, good. The new law prohibits school districts from implementing policies that force teachers to tell parents if a child asks to use a different name or pronouns. That subline is a little inaccurate. Anyway, we can zoom in on this a little bit there. There we go. Mo bigger. All right. California Governor Gavin Newsom on Monday signed a controversial, quote, forced outing bill into law, legislation that supporters say is essential to protect LGBTQ youth. Okay, so it's essential. We got to protect the youth, which means they are currently in harm's way, right? That's what it means to protect somebody. You don't protect somebody if they're not in harm's way. If I go to the store and I toss someone to the ground and I say, hey, I'm protecting you, from a bullet and there's nobody there with a gun, well, guess what? I'm not protecting them. Okay. All right. So Assembly Bill 1955, 1955, written by Assembly Member Chris Ward, a San Diego Democrat and member of the LGBTQ caucus, has three main components. What it does, it restricts school employees from revealing details about a student's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression without that student's consent. Okay. Next one, it prohibits school districts from making policies that require such disclosure. And number three, it bars school districts from punishing employees who support a student's rights. Okay, so these are the three things that this bill does. Goes on, politically motivated attacks on the rights, safety, and dignity of transgender, non-binary, and other LGBTQ plus youth are on the rise nationwide, including in California, Ward said in a statement. While some school districts have adopted policies to forcibly out students, the Support Education Futures and Educators for Today's Youth, that's the name of the bill. The act ensures that discussions about gender identity remain a private matter within the family. Now, I find that kind of interesting. Let me scroll this up a little bit so you can see. So it says, they want to ensure that discussions about gender identity remain a private matter within the family. So I want you to just hold on to that for just a moment. The bill has remained controversial throughout its journey in the legislature. Supporters have said LGBTQ youth need protection. One assembly member emotionally described how his mother told him at age 7 that she'd disown him if he was gay. Okay, so they're saying that LGBTQ youth need protection. And they're saying here now, like this story, well, when I was 7, my mom said she would disown me if I was gay. Okay, so how is what is the protection here exactly? Well, the protection is, let's say the 7-year-old goes to school, and I'm not defending the bill per se. We're just making sure that we understand what people are talking about. So presume that a 7-year-old goes to school and confides in the teacher and says, I'm gay, and my mom said she would disown me. Now, I'm not really sure if a 7-year-old really understands the word disown. That seems kind of a grown-up word for a 7-year-old. But hey, my son's got 2 years. Maybe in 2 years I'll realize, that he's really brilliant. He understands the concept of disowning a child. But this is the story that's kind of used. People like to use anecdotal stories when they're talking about these kind of things. That's fine, whatever. But it does seem a little bit weird. Like at 7, this is what you're told. But the idea is that the student will have somebody to confide in. So this is the protection that they're talking about. Because imagine if the student, who's it? It just says one assembly member. So imagine that this assembly member, when they were 7, who went to school, confided in their teacher, and the teacher said, well, I got to call your parents and tell them about that. So then they call the parents and they say, hey, did you know that your son or daughter was gay? And then the parent might go, well, I didn't know that, but thank you for telling me. And so then they get off the phone and then they tell the son or the daughter or whoever, him. Yes. So son, hey, you're disowned now. Remember, I tried to tell you, you're 7 years old. Now you're on your own. Get out of my house. So like, that's the anecdotal story here. All right. Opponents have slammed the bill, arguing it was rooted in disinformation about local school district policies. They've said it would make keeping secrets from parents into law. With the governor's signature on AB 1955, first in the nation policy reaffirms California's position as a leader and safe haven for LGBTQ plus youth everywhere. State Senator and LGBTQ caucus chair Susan Eggman, a Stockton Democrat, said in a statement, I'm deeply grateful for all the parents, teachers, youth, LGBTQ leaders, and so many other groups who came together to support this bill. Their support reaffirmed what this caucus already knew. Safe and supported schools for our children should be our top priority. Okay. So now we get down here and there's some interesting stuff. It says, according to a bill analysis, LGBTQ students feel less safe at school. Okay. So they're trying to protect kids at school by not outing students to their parents who may have confided in them. So I think there's a disconnect here, because if they feel less safe at school, then it seems like the bill needs to address the issues at school, not whether or not the parent is told about what the student confides into a teacher. A 2023 survey of LGBTQ youth showed that 46% of 13 to 17-year-olds considered suicide in the previous year, and that 17% attempted suicide. Almost 1 in 3 youth said their mental health suffered most or all the time because of anti-LGBTQ policies and laws, and 60% of youth in the study said they felt discrimination based because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Okay, so this is where we're starting to get a little bit of meat here. And we have a link, which I'll pull up here. This link goes to a survey from the Trevor Project back in 2023. So we're going to take a look at that because I have some questions. But first, let's take a look at this bill and let's see. Let's kind of go through the bill. We're not going to dive in deep. It's actually not that deep. In fact, you've already got an idea of what the bill is about, but we kind of want to skim through it really quickly because we like to be thorough on this show and make sure that, hey, we know what we're talking about when we agree or disagree with the bill. So let's take a look. All right. So there we are. Here's the bill. All right. Let's see. Now, the first thing that I want to note is that it's got a bit of a weird name. Okay. It says, this is the bill. So the number is AB 1955. But the title of the bill says Support Academic Futures and Educators for Today's Youth Act. Now, nowhere in there does it seem to suggest anything related to protecting LGBTQ children at all. In fact, if just by reading the title, it would seem that they're trying to improve academic outcomes for all kids. So then we go down a little bit further here and it says this bill would require, this is the bill speaking, this bill would require the State Department of Education to develop resources or, as appropriate, update existing resources for supports and community resources for the support of parents, guardians, and families of LGBTQ pupils and strategies to increase support for LGBTQ pupils as specified. So the bill itself is saying that they're going to support parents, guardians, and families, and then increase support for the students. So they lead with parents, guardians, and families, and then leap over and add at the very end students or pupils, as it writes. So I found that kind of interesting because, again, and I'm going to read you from the news article what it said. Where did it go? I've lost my spot here on the news article. So the politically motivated attacks on the rights, safety, and dignity of transgender, non-binary, and other LGBTQ youth are on the rise nationwide, including in California. And that's a quote from the from the bill's author. Okay. And then he goes on and says, while some school districts have adopted policies to forcibly out students, this act ensures that discussions about gender identity remain a private matter within the family. So it's kind of interesting. It feels a bit disingenuous here already because they're presenting it as if this is for the protection of children, of LGBTQ youth. And then it goes on, and then you read the title. The title says nothing about LGBTQ youth. In fact, the title would suggest that it's about all youth. And then it goes on, and the bill itself leads with talking about support for parents, guardians, and families. But it doesn't actually support any of the parents, guardians, or families by what it actually does. And again, the 3 main components, it limits school employees from outing a student, basically telling their parents or anybody. Actually, the bill actually says you can't tell anybody. It prohibits school districts from making policies that would require such a disclosure. And then it prohibits school districts from punishing any employee who won't do it. So where is the parents, guardians, and families in this? How are they being supported? In fact, I'll throw another one out. How are they being supported if authors of the bill and the bill itself says, hey, we need to keep this information private because it could be harmful if this information gets out to students. And one of the assembly members explicitly said they tell a story about being 7 years old and being told by their parent that if they come out as gay, that they're going to be disowned. Now, never mind, it doesn't say which assembly member, but let's just say that they're about my age. Well, I'm 46. This would have been 40 years ago. So you've got an assembly member who is supporting legislation based on an incident that allegedly happened 40 years ago, as if nothing has changed with society since then. And a lot has changed. And that's not even arguable. So it's very interesting, this bill. All right, so let's continue on. All right, so where do we want to go here with this? So again, it doesn't really seem to identify a problem that California needs to solve. So we go a little bit further here, and we've got this long list of things that says this act shall be known and may be cited as the Support Academic Futures and Educators for Today's Youth or Safety Act. The legislature finds and declares all of the following, and it has about 14 or 15 different items what it declares. So a lot of bills, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, it's kind of like the whereas clause. Whereas we found this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, right? So that's what's going on here. All pupils deserve to feel safe, supported, and affirmed for who they are at school. Okay, no disagreement there. Choosing when to come out by disclosing an LGBTQ plus identity and to whom are deeply personal decisions impacting health and safety, as well as critical relationships that every LGBTQ plus person has the right to make for themselves. I don't really disagree with that. Parents and families across California understand that coming out as LGBTQ plus is an extremely personal decision and want to support their children in coming out to them on their own terms. Okay, so that's interesting because this bill limits parents from learning about this, in a sense. So, parents and families have an important role to play in the lives of young people. Studies confirm that LGBTQ plus youth thrive when they have parental support and feel safe sharing their full identities with them, but it can be harmful to force young people to share their full identities before they are ready. Policies that forcibly out pupils without their consent remove opportunities for LGBTQ plus young people and their families to build trust and have these conversations when they are ready. So they're asserting a bunch of things here, and I'm not going to read them all, but they're asserting a bunch of things along this line here, like, hey, people do better when they're not forced to disclose information that's sensitive. That's basically what they're saying. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. And I don't know that most of this is really all that at odds with telling a parent, hey, your parent, your child is, has confided in me this thing. And personally, as a parent myself, I'm not big on other adults having secrets with my child. And I am actively teaching my child that there are no secrets with other adults. Why is that? Well, you shouldn't be asking that. But if I have to tell you, let's just lay it out on the table. There are a lot of adults out there that would do very inappropriate things with my child. And what do they say? This is a secret. Don't tell your mom and dad. So the only option that I have is to tell my child right now, because he's 5, there are no secrets with other adults. Why? Because he doesn't have the ability to distinguish when a secret is maybe a good secret, if you will, versus a bad secret. A good secret might be something like, hey, I'm buying a present for my significant other, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm just telling my students because you asked me what I did over the weekend, and I went shopping for my significant other's birthday, and I got them a really cool present. But shh, don't tell anybody because I don't want him or her to find out until I give them their present. That's okay. I don't have an issue with that. That would be a secret that I don't make a big fuss of or make a fuss at all about. But a bad secret would be, hey, little Johnny, come here. Let me put my hands on you in ways that are not appropriate. And by the way, this will just be our little secret. No. And so how, like, here's the problem. And people might say, well, DL, you're just being exaggerative. You could just tell a kid, like, somebody touches you in a special way or, certain way that it's not appropriate. Here's the thing about adults. They're very clever and they can do a lot of things that are not appropriate. And I cannot enumerate every single one of them. And since my child is 5, even when he's 7, right, I cannot enumerate them all, nor can I rely on him to necessarily understand, because there is a significant power dynamic with adults. So right off the bat, the big issue for me is that we're codifying into law this idea that secrets with your teacher are okay. Well, I don't know about you, but I remember seeing quite a few stories about teachers that are having inappropriate relationships with our students, male and female. Okay. And this is not me attacking the LGBTQ community and saying you're all a bunch of perverts, you're coming after my kid. What this is me saying is that I don't know all of the teachers that my my son is going to come into contact with. Like, I don't know them so personal that I don't have to worry about them. So as far as I'm concerned, I have to set some ground rules, some guidelines, and say, all right, no secrets with your teacher. And I expect the teacher to respect that. But this bill doesn't do that. All right, so it goes on and it gives some more of these kind of things, school policies that support LGBTQ plus pupils and their parents and families in working towards family acceptance on their own terms without interference from school and school staff, build safety and trust within school communities, yada, yada, yada. Like, I don't necessarily disagree with it, but none of these actually specify a problem that is happening in California. So that's my big concern, because I'm like, well, what is the problem that you're actually trying to solve? Because remember, when it comes to legislation, legislation is the force of government. That's what it is. It is, you could be punished in some way for violating it, right? You could get a fine, you could go to jail, you could end up on some sort of database, right? There are various things that can happen to you. And these are all against your will. Like, this is, like, you get found guilty of this thing, of a thing, then you can be punished. So we have to be very, very careful when it comes to laws, which laws we're willing to support. And when we support a law, that law should come with data that says, here is this explicit problem that we have to address. And here is data supporting this pathway to addressing it. So far from what I can tell in this bill, all it does is basically just say, okay, the teachers don't have to tell parents, and they cannot be made to tell parents, and they cannot be punished if they don't. And that's a problem for me, because I want you to think about this for a minute. Most people want to know about their child and what's going on so that they can address these issues. If my son is getting bullied, and it doesn't matter whether he's being bullied because he's LGBTQ plus, because he's maybe a little bit smaller, because he's Asian, whatever the case may be, the kids don't like his shoes. I don't know. I want to know if my son is being bullied for whatever reason. But imagine if now a child is being bullied, and the reason they're getting bullied is because they're gay or transgender or whatever they believe their identity is, right? Imagine that's the reason, and they confide in a teacher and say, yeah, the kids are, throwing things at me and doing things. The teacher says, well, why? And then the kid says, well, it's because I'm gay. Well, guess what? Now the teacher's off the hook. The teacher doesn't have to tell you, and they can't get in trouble for not telling you, right? Or I guess they could say, well, your son came to me and he's being bullied. Oh, why is my son being bullied? Well, I really can't tell you. Like, like, right? Or they find some way to weasel out of telling me. Right. So now I'm less informed as a parent about my own child who I am responsible for. And I will be less capable of helping to address the issue. Why are they making fun of you? Why are they bullying you? Right. We just saw the young lady. What was her name? It was just it was like maybe 6 months ago. Um, she, I'm trying to remember her name. It made national headlines. I'm drawing a blank on it. I can see a picture of her face, but she was the one that she got into a fight, and it initially got reported that she was, you know, beat up because she was gay, and then it turned out that she instigated an altercation by like pouring water on some students who were, I think, just making fun of her. And so then they actually got into a fight. She went home. Oh no, she went to the nurse's office, or no, she went home, and then she went to the doctor's. She went to the emergency room. They checked her out. They were fine. She woke up the next day and she was dead. Uh, right. But imagine, like, imagine that the parent, and I don't remember if the parents knew about her identity or whatnot, but imagine that she's getting bullied. She goes to the teachers and she tells them that she's getting bullied, and the teachers don't tell her parents. So now the parents maybe don't know that she's being bullied, nor do the parents know about her identity. And then the young lady goes and gets kind of tired of people bullying her, as victims do, and they decide to pull a stunt, pour water on, you know, one of the aggressors, and then that leads to a fight, and then she ends up dying the next day. Who's responsible for that? And you might say, well, Deal, you're just making this up. Not really. I'm only adding to an existing story, and I'm barely adding to it. All I'm adding is, hey, what if the teacher knew about her identity, and then what if the parents didn't? And the parents could have maybe helped out and said, okay, you're being bullied. Let's see what we can do about this. Right. I'm trying to remember her name, and it's just not coming to me. Anyway, so you get the point. This could be a real problem. And so what they're not doing, though, is, you know, they're saying like, hey, all these supportive measures are good, but they're not saying, well, here's where the problem is, and this is how the bill will solve this problem. Now, I have some questions about this. So if you remember back in that article a moment ago, I said, hey, there's a link, and it linked to the Trevor Project. So we're going to go back to this article here real quick, and we're going to, let's see, scroll down here. So here it is. According to a bill analysis, LGBTQ students feel less safe at school. It says a 2023 survey of LGBTQ youth, and then it goes on, right? So here's that link that goes to the Trevor Project. Well, here's the Trevor Project. So we're going to go up here. We're going to take a look at some. So here's the Trevor Project, and it's a long list of information. We'll just kind of skim over it. So it says like 41% of LGBTQ young people seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. 56% of LGBTQ young people who wanted mental health care in the past year were not able to get it. Fewer than 40% of LGBTQ young people found their home to be LGBTQ affirming. Roughly half of transgender and non-binary young people found their school to be gender affirming. So that's very interesting. Roughly half. So 50% of transgender and non-binary young people found their school to be gender affirming, and those who did reported lower rates of attempting suicide. So that's very interesting, because you've got half of these students don't find their school to be gender affirming, but the school is worried about the parents. Okay. Now, what I found interesting is if you scroll all the way down to the bottom here, it goes to a whole bunch of information. There's a whole bunch of data and statistics, you know, and stuff like. You can go, and I've got it linked. Oh, I will link it in the show notes so that you can go and look at it yourself. So we're going to go down here. We're not going to go through all of this. It's, you know, it's got all this information, because what I found important is, if I keep going down here, and did I go? Keep going. There we go. All right, the methodology. Because I'm always curious about studies. I want to know, like, what was the methodology? Not the math so much, but just, like, what did you use to come to this conclusion? All right. And so it says the content methodology for the Trevor Project's 2023 U.S. National Survey. Well, that's interesting. National Survey on the mental health of LGBTQ young people were approved by an independent institutional review board. All right. So we'll skip down to here. Although 98,023 individuals from unique IP addresses began the survey. So this was an online survey. 1,784 were ineligible, blah, blah, blah. We'll skip all the details of who they excluded and kept. At the end of the day, this results right there. Boom. This is what we want to look at. This results in a final analytic sample of 28,524 LGBTQ young people ages 13 to 17 or 24 who resided in the United States. Wait a minute. This is a bill for California, but they're relying apparently on information, a survey, an online survey that doesn't necessarily verify. Like if I'm 14, it says 13 to 24, right? So imagine I'm 14 years old and I fill out this questionnaire. They don't know if I'm lying or telling the truth, right? And while they did make the attempt to say, well, let's use unique IP addresses, the IP address at my house and the IP address at the library are different, but I could be the same person. So they didn't verify every single person and say these, what was it, 28,000 young people are actual real people, and they legitimately are LGBTQ. Now you might say, well, DL, are you denying somebody's identity? No. What I'm doing is I'm questioning online whether or not those people were who they say they were altogether. Maybe some of those people weren't 14 years old and they said they were, because maybe they want to like that not council member, but like that assembly member, recall a time when they were 7 and their parents said something terrible. So maybe they're that person and they're like, you know what? I'll just say I'm 14 because this is going to help out the young people. And it would have been help that I would have liked. So this is already a problem with this. But the problem gets further in that, number one, it says ages 13 to 24. So this bill is entirely about what schools can do. If you are 24 years old, you are no longer in high school or elementary school, right? You haven't been for like 6 years. So this really should have been narrowed down to 13 to 18-year-olds, maybe include 19-year-olds for some of the ones that are, a little bit academically lazy. But basically, it should have been narrowed even further because you've got adults answering a survey that's used in support of a bill that's addressing minors, specifically minors in school. And then so on top of that, then this is all about the United States, which is a problem because LGBTQ plus advocates themselves will tell you that some states are more difficult than others. So out of that 28,000, how many were in California and what were their answers like? Because all the statistics that are above, they apply overall, but we don't, and they apply to all 50 states. I don't know the proportions of all 50 states. But what I do know is that LGBTQ advocates will regularly tell us that a place like California is much safer for LGBTQ youth than a place like Florida, at least based on legislation. I mean, just recently, it was like, 3 months ago, or maybe 4 months ago, somewhere around there, that people were saying, hey, if you're LGBT, or maybe it was a year ago, I don't know. But they were saying like, hey, Florida's not safe for the gay people, for the gay folks, the gay and transgender folks, right? Get out of here. You got to move. It's a terrible place. I mean, that wasn't true, but that's what people were saying. But they weren't saying that about California. So I would imagine that those who were from California had entirely different answers than those who were from Florida. And since you've got California versus all the other states, there's a lot of red states that could swing these percentages. Now that's fine if you're taking a national survey and say, hey, nationally, this is the average, right? That's fine. I have no issues there. But when you start making bills for California, then you need to know what's going on in California, and is this the most appropriate way to address this issue? Because if you're addressing an issue in California that's more suited for some other state or maybe multiple states, then you're again passing feel good legislation. But more importantly, what you're doing by passing legislation like this, you are telling youth in California, you are at risk, but maybe they're not. Maybe, and again, I don't know. I tried to look for the information, but I couldn't find the specific breakdown of states. But it's possible that where it was like what 41% tried to commit suicide, it's possible that in Florida the number's higher, maybe like 50 or 60%, and in California it's only 20%. Now 20%, like they matter, don't get me wrong, but that's half of the original number. That means there's a different situation going on. The landscape is different in California. And that might require different legislation. You may not need certain legislation because you may not have a particular problem, or you may have a different problem that needs to be addressed. But California wouldn't know that because they're relying on national data. Now, what else is interesting is if you go to the Williams Institute, which is another popular resource for finding information about the LGBTQ community, you see that it shows that the LGBT youth population in the United States is almost 2 million. And this is relatively recent. I don't think there's a timestamp or a date stamp here. I don't have a date stamp. But this is like from their website. And they generally keep up. They keep up with this information. So then we see in the that's the US, almost 2 million. And then we see that California has, I mean, scroll up a little bit more there. California has 244,000. Now, if you remember from the Trevor Project, the results nationally were 28,000. Okay. Now, this is a sampling. It's supposed to be representative. But again, the question is, out of that 28,000, how many of those came from California? Right? Because if you were just to divide it by 10 states, you're looking at 2,000. Right? But if you divide it by 50 states, I'm not doing the math live on air, but if you did the math and you said, what's 28,524 divided by 50, and then you're going to get an average for all 50 states, what is that number? And does it accurately reflect the 244,000 that are in California? So there are some data problems here with this. Because I don't know that it's explicitly reflective. Now, if you're just having a casual conversation, it's not really a problem, right? Like if I'm talking to somebody from California and I say, well, did you know that statistically this many youth attempt suicide, or this many youth feel this particular way, or don't have access to this, and that are in the LGBTQ community? If I say that just in a casual conversation, yeah, that's fine. If I'm citing national statistics, that's okay. But it changes the moment that I start looking to pass legislation. And in this particular case, I don't believe that they have provided the necessary information, the data to support the need for this bill. So I can't support it. Right. I mean, it sounds good. Like, hey, we're going to support. I mean, well, okay, hold on. Let me back up a little bit. Some of the assertions that they make in the bill sound good. I am still not on board with them limiting information from a parent. I have an issue with that, and I don't believe that in this particular case that a teacher should need to get consent from my child to tell me what's going on with my child. I cannot be a good dad. My wife cannot be a good mother if the school is hiding information about our child. They are cutting us off at the knees from helping our own child. And they're doing it under the guise of, hey, so many LGBTQ kids have problems at home when they want to try to come out. They don't feel safe. And I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm sure there are some, right? But the problem is, number one, how many? How many in California specifically? Is California doing better than other states? Are they because they're much more liberal? Are families there more open and welcoming? So in other words, are LGBTQ youth in a better shape there to not have to worry about their families? Or are they just as bad as, say, the Floridas and Texases of the world, which are generally red states and generally considered to be not such safe havens for people that are, for LGBTQ youth coming out? Now, I don't know that I would agree with that, but we're going on the assumption that red is bad, blue is good, kind of a thing, right? Like the blue states, they're Democrats, they're progressive, they're more accepting, they're more open. I don't agree with that, but this is the presumption, right? Like this is the national presumption that we make. And that red states, well, they're conservative and they're bigots and they don't tolerate this, and they're the first ones to say there's no such thing as a trans child, So we make these distinctions socially. Okay, well, fine. If we're going with those distinctions, then the data should tell you something different between those states. And if they do, then you need data specific to California in order to reasonably pass legislation that's affecting Californians. Otherwise, again, feel good legislation at best, harmful at worst, because it ignores a potential real problem that might actually need addressed. Or maybe there's a conversation at a minimum that needs to be had, and they're not having it because some 40 or 50-year-old assembly member is weeping about what happened to them when they were 7 and acting as if times have not changed one bit, and acting as if California, which is supposed to be a blue progressive state, is just as bad as the red conservative states. So yeah, this bill is problems all over. And I oppose it. And I would say that if you're a parent that cares about your child and wants to know as much as you can about your child so that you can address your child's needs accordingly, you need to leave California. Right now, I'm not going to squawk and act like, like I know people make exaggerations about these kind of bills. Like, I think the bill is very simple and you don't have to make any exaggerations. It's not based on data, and they're not helping parents ensure the safety of their own children. They're assuming that the teachers are always the good guy. Well, teachers aren't always the good guy. Some teachers take advantage of students. I mean, you can go look up right now. There's tons of stories. Like there's probably 4 or 5 stories from this year alone of some teacher that took advantage of a child in some way. Probably 4 or 5 easy that we could find. Right? Teachers are not always the good guys. And so we can't just lead with this notion that, okay, well, teachers don't have to tell because the parents might be bad. Well, they might be, they might not be. And if you've watched this show long enough, I used to do I did a series with Pastor Tubb, a fellow libertarian here in Jacksonville, and we did this series, Libertarians on 25 Issues. And one of the issues, and then we would periodically do things that were unrelated to that, and we would talk about like national topics or maybe local state topics, whatever. And one of them was the "Don't Say Gay" bill here in Florida. That's not really the name of it, but that was the colloquial name that they gave it. "Don't Say Gay." And so we were talking about it, and I asked him because of Pastor Tubb, you are more conservative, right? Yes, I am. So, and you're a pastor of he is the old school pastor. We're not talking about like one of these more progressive pastors, that interpret differently. No, he's a little bit closer to like the pastors that I grew up knowing in the 90s. Okay. A little better in some ways, but similar in terms of his religious beliefs. And so, and they are conservative. And so I asked him, I said, if you had a child that was gay, would they be in any danger in your home? He says, absolutely not. And I said, would you tell them that you didn't want them anymore, that you didn't love them, or, I named all these different things. And he was like, nope, 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 nope. None of that would happen. And so this bill does not account for people like Pastor Tubb who might actually be more conservative, but also not a danger or of any kind to their own children. And that's the problem with these kind of bills. And that's the problem with basing them on national data. So the bill is no good. Don't support it. And you should probably move out of California because they're going to limit your ability as a parent to know who your child is and to address their needs accordingly. Because teachers don't have to tell you. That's that. Awesome. Let's see what we got here for a comment. It's an interesting point. IP address does not always help. CVPN. So yeah, I could get online through a VPN, virtual private network, which basically masks my IP. And I could go and fill out the same questionnaire twice. I could fill it out once with the VPN and once without the VPN. And they will think of me, my two responses, as two different people. Now, are people doing that? I don't know. They might be. But again, this is the problem. Like, you don't have these controls for such a survey. And so we should always be skeptical of online surveys. The other thing about online surveys is, who are the people that are most likely to fill them out? And it's possible that the most likely LGBTQ youth who are filling out these forms, these surveys, are ones who've had trouble. Whereas maybe ones who have not had a problem at home are not necessarily filling them out, right? So you could have a disproportionate number of who it is that's filling these out. And this is, I'm not just making this up because like I have some issue with the LGBTQ community. No, this has actually been a longstanding issue with surveys, is who are the people that are most likely to fill out a survey. And if you go back and you look at any other kind of online survey, that's one of the concerns that people have. So this is not some new thing that I'm bringing up just because, I don't like this bill or I don't want to protect trans kids or whatever, right? Nope, we have to evaluate things critically, and we have to apply the same critical thoughts as from one situation to another when it's appropriate. And it is appropriate here. We're talking about an online survey. Online surveys don't all of a sudden get rigorous because it's the LGBTQ community. They suffer the same issues that any other online survey suffers. Now, before we close this out, I want to play a video, a final video. This is for somebody, I believe it was a parent and a teacher who spoke in opposition of this bill. So I want to play it because I thought it was very interesting. So let's play this.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Arian Adam Chikova, and I live in San Francisco. I'm a progressive Democrat, and I have been a CTA high school teacher for 22 years. I am a lifelong LGBT activist. I am a mother of a formerly trans-identified son.
Okay, let's pause it right there. I want you to make sure you heard all of that. This woman here, first of all, I don't know if you caught it. She said, I'm a lifelong LGBT activist. She dropped the T. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a lot of people that are in the LGBT community that are getting irritated with the T's, because the T's are a lot of the activists. And when I saw this video, I thought it was interesting for a couple points. One, she identifies as a progressive Democrat. She identifies as part of that same community. And she has a child that was formerly like detransitioned. So this is like, you might look at this as almost like a unicorn. Like, does this actually even happen? It does. So that's interesting. So let's hear what she has to say. Excuse me. Let's hear what she has to say in opposition to this bill.
10 years ago, no students identified as transgender. Now, every class has at least a few students who identify as something other than their own sex. My son's trans identity was a result of anxiety, loneliness, and too much time on the internet, like so many other youth. Sadly, these children who reject their sex believe that they were born wrong and dissociate with their natural bodies, which results in a downward spiral of their already fragile mental state. We as teachers are told, trained, mandated to accept the child's pronouncement at face value and keep this secret from parents. We game the students' records to automatically change names and pronouns depending upon the recipient and lie to parents. Senators said teachers do not want to be the gender police. That is true. Teachers also do not want to be liars or co-conspirators in the social transition of students. Parents should be trusted to make decisions for their own kids. We should not be making an assumption of guilt about parents when it comes to their own children. Teachers should nurture, not obstruct, the parent-child bond. Teachers are evaluated on how well we value and respect students' families and their role. AB 1955 obliterates that mutual respect. The Senate was filled with coming out stories, and the bill's author erroneously equates coming out as gay to the adoption of a transgender identity. Being gay carries no chance of irreversible medicalization to fit a sense of self, nor does it require active deception by schools.
Time is up. Please wrap up.
In children, trans ideation is almost always accompanied by other serious mental health issues. Secrecy from parents is not the answer. This
Please
bill
wrap
will
up.
only hurt children.
Thank you.
Vote no, and thank you.
All right. I thought that was very enlightening. And I think she nailed it in the context of this bill doesn't help parents. Think about that. Think about what she said for a moment. She said, if that trans youth almost always come with some other mental health issue. So if my child is identifying as trans, whether they are or not is not relevant, conservatives. They're identifying that way. What she just said is that's always accompanied with other issues. So if the teachers aren't telling me, hey, DL, your child has told us that they're trans, and statistically, they're at higher risk for mental health issues. You may want to look into this because we know you want to be a good parent. And so then I would be able to say, oh, I didn't know this. I thought some things were off, but I just didn't know. So then I might say, Johnny, let's have a conversation. I'm here for you. I'm your dad, right? And a lot of people might be skeptical, but I believe she's correct. We should absolutely start. The default should be that parents want to build a good relationship with their child. They want to help them out. They may not always go about it the right way, but they have the right, their heart is in the right place. And we need to have that as the default. And I do agree that this bill actually obliterates that and it makes the default, your parents are not safe, your teacher is. And I think that's a huge problem. And I think more importantly, it destroys families because it puts a wedge and says you're not safe, even if you might be, right? Again, we need more data. We don't have the data to say, we know you're not going to be safe. We don't have that. They're just making an assumption. And a lot of them are, like she said, are supported by stories of people's days from when they were kids. Well, yeah, I mean, there are some things that don't change over time, but there are things that do change. It was when I was a kid, if I called someone a homo, we laughed and we made fun of them. Nobody really said anything. The teacher might go, DL, that's not very nice. That's about it. Today, if you call someone a homo, you could be fired from your job. Fired. Right? Things are different. It is not 40 years ago. Things are vastly different. And we should really, really support families by starting with your family probably wants to be good. If we find out otherwise, we will address it as needed. So no, no, no on this bill. Although they already passed it, so there's not much you can do about it other than to move out of California. All right, folks, got to get out of here. That is my show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative and inspiring. Be sure. I hope you're inspired to leave California, come to Florida, but and informative. You know, I hope you've learned a little bit more about how to analyze and review a bill, because our legislative bodies are passing bills upon bills upon bills. Republicans, Democrats, it doesn't matter. They just love passing bills. They got nothing better to do than just pass bills left and right. And we need to be aware of what they're doing, and we need to hold them accountable for passing crummy bills. I don't want bills passed that aren't going to solve real problems. Quit wasting my time. And if that's what you're going to do, then we need to vote you the hell on out. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer, you can go to my Rumble channel. You can find either one of them. You can find those at youtube.libertydad.com or rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. For now, I'm out.